Disclaimer. Sam Pocker's The Influencers is a podcast where I ask artists who have influenced me questions about their work that I haven't been asked before. Due to the nature of this program, there is little to no exposition of the subjects or the artists themselves. It is intended for future generations to learn about details that would not have been appropriate in an autobiography, interview, or public question and answer session that are common in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. This is a nice way of saying that casual fans of an artist may dislike this program, but it is not necessarily intended for them. Learning about the artistic process may ruin the experience for you, and you should be aware of that before continuing to listen. There may be subject matter that you find triggering or offensive. This podcast does not endorse or oppose the viewpoints presented by its guests. To learn more about myself or this podcast, you may visit sampocker.com. Welcome to The Influencers. I'm Sam. My guest today is Tommy Chong, half of Cheech and Chong, obviously icon of counterculture for over 4 decades. Tommy, it's such an honor to have you on the program today. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Well, the honor's all mine, believe me.
Tommy, I know in most of the interviews you do, you get asked the same things over and over again, and the point of this program is to ask you some very, very niche questions about your work that more or less I can't find any record of you having answered. I've been studying your work for over 20 years, and there's never really a format where you can ask these kind of questions. So that's the point of these interviews.
Excellent.
All right?
Excellent. I like new things.
Good. First thing I'd like to ask you, Tommy. After the Wedding album, you took a break. It was the first time you guys had taken a break from touring for several years. And you knew you were going to make a movie. You didn't know it was up in smoke yet. And you wrote Jack and the Weedstalk with your Tai Chi instructor, Joel, who apparently...
That's right.
He had written a whole bunch of screenplays, and he was going to help you write a screenplay. And you intentionally, when you were writing it, you never showed it to anybody, including Cheech. And the question I have for you about that is, who taught you that method of screenwriting, that the first script you wrote to stick in a drawer and never show anybody?
Nobody. In fact, I never... I never even thought about it. What happened? Like you said, it was the first attempt. It was wasn't bad. And actually, after years went by, I brought it out of the drawer, and we tried to make an animated feature out of it. And I just started it, and then animation wasn't my thing at the time. It still isn't. Although I dabbled with animation, but yeah. Well, that's the way Cheech and I always worked. We'd start one thing, and then something else would. Because we're together, something else would come up, and boom, next thing you know, we're off on that other tangent. Up in Smoke itself, I just wanted to make a movie. I never showed the Weedstock to Cheech because I'd written it with Joel, and so I was going to, just Cheech and I was always a partnership. And so I wasn't really comfortable showing that. Actually, the way I work too really is I don't show anything unless someone says, "Well, show me what you got," and then I'll do it. But I wasn't trying to sell anything at the time. I grew up in the world of improvisation. And improvisation is exactly it. You change. It's not plotted out. It's improvised at the moment. And that's what happened with Up in Smoke, too, because Up in Smoke started out, Lou, our manager turned director, he had in mind doing Cheech and Chong's greatest hits.
Yeah. And you had the whole argument over the ending and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's really well documented, the whole Up in Smoke. I think there isn't a second of production on Up in Smoke that hasn't been documented and broken down into minutia. So that's great. Next question. A lot of your, and I apologize for reading, but obviously having taken so much time, I want to make sure I get the question right. A lot of your directorial and production decisions are identical to those of Roger Corman. I know that you've said Shelby was in some Troma films when she was starting out, but I can't find any records of which ones she was in. Were you friends with Roger Corman? Did he show you his system? How did you learn that school of filmmaking?
Well, actually, I don't know if he was even in. I was influenced by him as much as I was by what's the guy that did MASH?
Altman, Robert Altman.
Robert Altman.
Yeah,
Robert Altman.
Because Robert you used those people on Up in Smoke. Yeah,
Robert Altman was the guy that I really admired, and I loved his method. He was strictly improv too. And and like me, he just did a couple of movies and that was it. Because the improv depends on the actors that you have, and the actors in Up in Smoke were pure, beautiful improv actors.
Perfect, yeah. And other than Altman and Terry Malick,
yeah.
Were there any other directors? Because Peter Sellers, obviously, you've always referenced as being an actor that you looked up to, but were there any other directors who really influenced your direction?
Well, I noticed Hal Ashby. I just saw Harold and Maude, and I was influenced by Ashby quite a bit.
Of course.
I just subliminally, and what's the Cassavetes. John Cassavetes,
of course.
Yeah. He was a big influence on me too. Mainly because he would do his own projects, and with his wife. I love that fact too, because that was the other thing with me. I don't know if it's the Chinese bloodline in that, but in my family, especially my father, he's Chinese, and there was a thing about, he always included the family because the family was your workforce.
Sure.
And so that's the way I was my entire life. And so when I got started with a nightclub, my brother came in and took over running the nightclub.
I remember. Yeah.
And then my father and my mother and everybody, my brother had everybody working.
Family business.
Yeah. And so when I started doing the movies, my wife Shelby was actually studying acting before I got into it. And so then my whole aim was to put her in the movie, which is why I put Cheech's wife in first.
Right? Yeah. And let me ask you, when you were doing that, because you've talked about that part of it, but not your motivation for that part of it, which I really appreciate learning. I never thought of it as the Chinese family business influence. But as you were doing that and you were starting to build an ensemble cast, which is just like Cassavetes, I hadn't realized that was the influence for that. You were getting Paul Rubens and Sandra Bernhard, and at the end you were built up. You had Jim Varney in there, and you're trying to move forward with that whole kind of thing. When we switch over to Things Are Tough All Over, the ensemble cast seems to mostly disappear, other than your two wives and Donna. I can't remember the actress's name who played Donna. Was that?
Evelyn Guerrero.
Yeah. Was that a financial thing, or was that a art decision? Or how did that work out?
It really started. The Cheech influence came in pretty heavy. He was really making a lot of noises that I was, becoming the guy, the director, and I was trying to appease Cheech the whole time.
I see.
I tried to appease Cheech. When I started, everything is different, because everything changes. When we did Things Are Tough All Over. By the way, I did a podcast yesterday, and the guy said, my favorite movie is Things Are Tough All Over. And I looked at him, and he goes, well, I'm a musician. And then I forgot about the parts in there.
Yeah.
And with Things Are Tough All Over, I tried to make concessions to Cheech.
I
For
see.
instance, he named the movie. He wanted to name the movie because Cheech, in a roundabout way, he named Up in Smoke, because Up in Smoke, we never had a name for it. Like Lou had it down as Cheech and Chong's greatest hits, but when I wrote a song for that.
Right.
Called Up in
Up in
Smoke,
Smoke.
and that when Cheech heard it, he said, "Okay, that's the name of the movie," uh, and that was my aim. I was trying to appease Cheech, but then again, being the sort of megalomaniac that I am, I had to go down my path. I mean, that's the way I am. There's no
Sure.
other way around it.
Sure. Um, when you did Cheech and Chong's next movie, which originally was titled Cheech and Chong Go Hollywood, and I have the script for it. I have read every page of that script, every which way, know it inside and out. It wasn't really, when most people have a hit movie, the sequel is the same movie all over again, kind of a thing. And you went the other direction with it. Here you just did vignettes of stuff that you encountered in Hollywood after becoming famous and having kind of a different sort of life here. And I know that obviously the influence for Red, and I know that the point of bringing Red, that scene with Red getting the valet car handed to him, actually happened at like a luxury resort in Hawaii or something. But were there
Oh
any,
yeah.
were there any situations that you can remember at this point of actual things that happened to you while you were working on that, and you said, we have to put that in the movie?
No, that was next movie you're talking about.
Yeah.
Uh,
Because next movie is all Hollywood. And I don't know if you've
yeah.
ever seen Los Angeles Plays Itself. Have you ever seen that documentary?
No.
It's a movie about LA and how it's represented in films, done by a USC professor named Tom Anderson. And there's not a single inch of Cheech and Chong anywhere in that movie. And I said to him, why not? Because when I moved here and I wanted to learn about the city, that is like one of the great sociological studies of LA is that film. And so I've
Yeah.
always wondered, like, little things that happen to you that you put in there,
Yeah, well, yeah, that was my thing. That's why Cheech and I were such, because he was such a wealth of material.
Right.
His whole because and he would give it little drips and dribbles. He's that reminds me of the time and blah blah blah, and so I we did that with Up in Smoke. We did that with next movie for sure.
Yeah.
Because I was unbridled with next movie, and my aim with next movie was to put every funny thing I could find in the movie, because I always felt, and I was except for the for the title, I always felt that was I mean that's part of the improvisational process. You know what I mean? You it's like you get a seed and you plant it, and if and if it works, whoa, boom, you got something.
Sure.
And with Cheech, that was the thing with Cheech, because and then also I was so influenced by the committee, the improv group, the committee in Second City, and the trouble, in a way, because I wasn't an actor, I was a musician coming into the world, and so I approached everything as a musician. You hear a tune, you learn it. You don't get vilified for it. In fact, people go, oh, and you pay, but whatever. If you record, you pay the residual to the writer.
Right.
Well, in the movie, I found out that you can snatch ideas anywhere from anybody, which I did all along. Every movie I made, like Things Are Tough All Over, for instance, it was the boom man that was giving me, helping me with the movie, because again, I would start, we'd get in the middle of the movie, and then all of a sudden, okay, now what? Now where do we go from here? and so we'd have to write and figure out, and I would usually use what was going on in the world and then do our version of it. Like in Things Are Tough All Over. By the way, see, Cheech named that movie, and to me, that kind of. Because I wanted to call it Riding High, and I thought Riding High would have been a better title. Cheech he wanted to call it Things Are Tough All Over because I think his character says that in
in the intro. Things are tough all over.
Things are tough all over.
Yeah.
But I always struggled with my instincts and then appeasing other people, as you do in improv. Sure. It's not written, so you give the other guy, like playing tennis. You give him a shot, and if he hits the ball back, well, then you got a game.
This is still on Next Movie question. When you look at the script of Next Movie, it seems like you were purposely writing scenes to take advantage of as much of the Universal lot as possible. Now, like you said, you knew you were just going to go in there and do something different from the script, but you were writing setups so you could have locations and have a general idea. Most of the scenes don't appear in the final film, and also because your work was considered controversial at the time, which we'll talk about in a second, you had to simultaneously shoot a clean version for television while you were shooting the regular R-rated version. Was not filming a lot of the scenes that you intended to set up for a budget issue, or once the reality of having to do improv twice and make two versions of the film, you were kind of like, screw it, we'll just do more of this and less of that?
Well, no, the two versions never happened till way after the movie had been cut and released.
Did you go back and reshoot? How did that work?
No. They came to me. Universal came to me and they said, we can make this. We can take out the weed things and make it looking for diamonds and all that.
Yeah.
And my. Because I was an improv actor, again, I said, well, go for it. Do it. Do what you got to do. I was never married because I never wrote. When you improv, you just go with what you got.
Sure.
And then, like, I almost forget about it. Whereas if you write a script, which is another way, and sometimes the way to go is to fall in love with the situations that you write to the point where they're your children. And if you mess with them, like, like Sophie's Choice, but I was never that way because I never really considered myself a movie director. I never really did right up in my whole career because I was never comfortable. In fact, I had a job. I was given a job by Canon Pictures to direct a comedy with Richard Dreyfuss's
and then you gave
brother.
The money back, and Golan was shocked, right? And so the only person ever to hand Golan and Globus their money back in the history of that whole company.
Yeah, because
at one point when you had the money, though, did you? Because they were famous for like making whole movies in 48 hours. Like at some point, did you consider just going in head first and doing it anyway?
Again, I respected the writers, the actors, and the writers, and I did not respect their overall look at things. See, with me, with a movie, I go way back, to the beginning. Martin and Lewis, I was a big fan, and everything else. In all the comedies, they always had a beautiful woman in there somewhere. I mean, that was. And when I start working with Dreyfuss and David Landsberg, I couldn't convince them, that you needed a beautiful woman. And so I looked at these guys, and I
love that that's the reason.
And I said, Are we talking gay here? whatever it was.
Yeah.
I couldn't convince him. And then I said, "Oh man, I got to get out of there. I got to
That's
get out of this."
amazing.
Because you can fix a lot of things, but you can't fix that.
Yeah.
You need that female thing. And I've been looking now at a lot of old sitcoms,
Yeah.
Three's Company and all that, man. And back in the day, man, it was like, it was almost too much,
Yeah.
TNA, But I wanted just one one scene, where the audience would wake up and go, "Whoa, look at her," and they never gave it to me. And then I realized, oh man, they just got me along so they could get the deal, and so I was like, a lot of directors are, where they just, just paint by the numbers, whatever you got, shoot it, take the money, and go on to the next job, But I never knew how to do that.
Yeah. You often tell the story about Belushi and Aykroyd being on the set of next movie, but you must have known that you were going to be shooting on the lot at the same time as the Blues Brothers because you have reference to them in the original script. I know that you were always aware of the fact that you'd never been invited to be on Saturday Night Live. And like you say, you were a big fan of Second City, but the corporate interests that be kind of kept you guys apart for a long time. Honestly, how much were you subconsciously or consciously trying to make some kind of collaboration with Belushi and Aykroyd happen at that point as a way of being compensated for having been blacklisted from SNL?
Well, I understood the SNL. I understood why they would never have the song,
Sure.
And I respected. I respected that. I turned down. Don't forget, I turned down a huge NBC offer for television,
Yeah.
and much to Cheech's chagrin, he
Right.
wasn't that thrilled. But we were offered everything, and I turned it down. I said
Yeah.
no. I don't want to. I don't want. Had we done that, we would have been like Freddie Prinze. A memory in some obscure history of television. And I knew that, and I knew that my thing had to be movies. Because
Yeah.
that's Cheech and Chong. We were blacklisted from every
Yeah,
normal thing for
you
it,
got
by
arrested just for doing
everybody.
a show and just crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But when, like I'm saying, when you were prepping to do next movie, you knew Blues Brothers were going to be on the lot at the same time, and in the back of your mind, were you sort of trying to find a way to get them involved or get yourselves involved in their picture in one way or another, or just
No, not at
okay,
all.
okay,
Not at all. Because to me, they were big fans of Cheech and Chong.
right,
Belushi for sure, and Dan too. Absolutely, absolutely. I respected, the whole Second City and everything else, but I understood why we couldn't be part of it. Uh, and I still understand it. Because. It's funny with Second City, they they had characters play Cheech and Chong.
right,
A
yeah,
couple of years ago, they had a couple of their characters play Cheech and Chong as if we were dead. You know,
yeah,
I mean, we could have been on that show at any time. And actually, we started a lot of things with Dick Clark. When we went on the Raider record with Dick Clark, we tore up the set, and I told Dick, I warned him, and he loved it, man. He got this big smile on his face, and he loved that kind of stuff. But the rest of the establishment, especially Lorne Michaels, I guess, he's Canadian, very, very strict. He hated the fact that we influenced Belushi as much as we did, I never, no, I never saw Cheech and Chong and the Blues Brothers ever doing anything together, and I know that we influenced the Blues Brothers big time
right,
because Cheech and I, we were so musical with our act,
right,
that we should be into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame just with "Earache My Eye," that one song, because it is, it's very respected by the rock world and the music world. But no, no. I love when Dan and because they came to us, I had no time to go to them, but they're actors. They, had the time off, and so they wanted to come with us. A little footnote there: we went into the lunch area one time, and there all the guys from Stripes were there.
Which was written for you, just for the anyone watching it doesn't know.
Yeah. And Bill Murray got really almost insulting, because as Bill Murray can get, and he started talking real loud, for everybody, hey, you missed out, man, you had your chance, you could have done it, you snooze, you lose kind of thing, and it was weird because I had never really met Bill Murray face to face, like Belushi was a big fan. But that was it, and I think in a lot of respects, Dan, Aykroyd was a fan, but I think more because of Belushi. But Belushi was one of those. Oh, he would tell us stuff when he was in Second City, and they were trying to do a record. After we got our record, he'd be in the studio, and they kept telling him, "Too much Cheech and Chong, too much Cheech and Chong," and it was kind of funny.
Which is interesting because the other thing I wanted to ask you about with Second City is, after you guys hit it big with Up in Smoke, I think I have the date, but it's 2 months after next movie was released. Rick Moranis and Dave Thomas debuted Bob and Doug McKenzie, who were basically Cheech and Chong with beer instead of weed. They were Second City. That also had a successful album and film, just like you guys. How did that affect you at the time? Do you remember thinking you'd reach some kind of artistic peak within the Cheech and Chong framework? Were you flattered or upset by their success? Had you ever discussed collaborating with them?
No, because Cheech and I were never really a team as they were. They had. Well, Cheech, when we joined up, Cheech joined my acting group in Vancouver, one thing he said to me, he said, "I'll follow you for a while." Because Cheech, the character, it took a little bit of coaxing, to get him to do that character, because we didn't know he was Mexican when we were in Vancouver.
Right, and he was worried it was going to be offensive. That was his main thing.
Yeah. His thing, and so when we did a live show in Encino. I forget the name of the club, but we got hired to do 2 shows in one night.
It was like it was a jazz club, right?
Yeah, no, it was a dance club.
It
was dance club where they were dancing, and they had to stop dancing to watch our comedy. And so the first show never went over that well. Right. It was just strict. And so then, we can improv right away. And so I said to Cheech, I said, "But come on, there must be a character you can do." Right, and he said, "Well, there is one, but I hesitate." He didn't want to do it. And I said, "Why?" He said, "It's detrimental," I think he said was the word. And I said, "Well, that's perfect. That's our business. That's what we're in, that business." And so then he showed me a little bit of the character, and then I wrote a bit that I knew from the black clubs that I'd played in, backed up all my, most of my life, and it was about a guy. It was a black comedian going on a date with a woman with a car, and the car he would make it appear by miming it, cleaning it and everything. And so I showed Cheech that part of the car, and then he took it from there. And that changed.
Cheech had said that character was in love with his car, was obsessed with the cars or new cars, and that's what you said. We'll go with that.
Yeah. Cheech, when he and then when he did that, when he said it in an accent, "Hey, Red Freak, you want to ride, man? Come on." when he said that, you could feel this electricity in the audience. And it was a perfect audience to try it on because they were more hostile than friends. This is the second show they're watching, and it was like, okay, what do you got now? And when we did that, we won that audience. And when we did that, then our career just went through the roof.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the Bob and Doug film Strange Brew?
Oh yeah.
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 And you liked it.
Well, we influenced so many people, man.
Yeah.
But the influence is like it's almost like a formula,
Right.
The comedy, because I was influenced by the Smothers Brothers.
Okay.
My character was almost like a ripoff of Tommy Smothers. The way he would act with Cheech, with his brother, and then Cheech and I, when we're doing interviews and stuff like that, because acting, you're influenced by everybody, and the one, especially a comedy team, that like Martin and Lewis. I grew up with Martin and Lewis, so I understood that funny guy in the kind of like the straight guy, but Cheech, I saw him. He got tired of doing that. He didn't want to be typecast into Pedro. Although everybody else, like George Lopez and every other Chicano, be after him.
Stole
they
the act.
Yeah. Wow, they just said, "Okay, we'll take it from here."
Fluffy and all those guys. Yeah. I wanted to ask you about Chuck Berry because, you have so many Chuck Berry references in your work. And Chuck Berry, his first big single, I think you were 17 or 18 when it came out. And people always ask you about Jimi Hendrix and always ask you about Motown and all that kind of stuff. But nobody ever asks you much about Chuck Berry, but it seems to me he was very important to you in some way.
Me and the Stones and the Beatles and anybody that ever picked up a guitar and played rock and roll, we owe everything, and we owe it all to Chuck. And I met Chuck too at the height of his career. It was in Calgary, and we had been doing his songs as soon as we heard him. Man. But that was our first, Roll Over Beethoven was our first song that we learned as a band. As a young kid. And, oh man, to meet Chuck and the way he played that guitar and danced and acted and wrote, his writing. I mean, there wouldn't have been the Beatles if it wasn't, or the Stones if it wasn't for Chuck, because Chuck opened that door. And by the way, I just saw a documentary on Buddy Guy.
Yeah.
And I was always so much enamored with Chuck Berry that I never paid attention to Buddy Guy. And then coming home last weekend, I watched this documentary, a great documentary on Buddy Guy. And oh my God, I can't wait. I got to get that documentary. It's another part of my life that was a piece of it that was missing but Chuck himself, there's so many things about Chuck that I loved. And even I understood even toward the end, when he got a little perverted, not a little perverted, he got really perverted. But I love that attitude. I love Chuck's whole thing, the way he looked at music and the way he wrote, his writing, his poetry. I mean, all the rappers, everybody, they owe Chuck, a nod at least.
When his 45s first coming out, did you go to the store and buy the 45s and listen to him over and over? Were you that level of excited about him specifically? Or?
The singer of our song, the head lead singer, Tommy Milton.
Yeah.
He would see. I got into the black crowd in Calgary as a dancer. I could dance, and I had a black girl partner, and we won some dance contests. And then I got into the black crowd. That's where I met Tommy Milton, the singer. He was a football player, but he could sing. Not bad. not great, but he wasn't a singer. He was a football player that could sing. And so but he got all the records, and he would get the records. We would get the 78s from the porters that came up from the States into Canada, and they would bring the records with them, and that's how we got turned on to Chuck. We got turned on to Chuck was through the TV and the radio. But like Sonny Boy Williamson and all the great blues artists, Muddy Waters, all them, it all came up. 78s came up through the
wow.
It come up through the railroad, the porters on the railroad. Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. Kind of a technical question that you may or may not know. On Things Are Tough All Over, Shelby used her maiden name as an actress, but her married name as the assistant producer. And nobody seems to ever ask about that. What was the story behind that?
She didn't want to be nailed, as the wife, as an actress, because she never really wanted to get married. The only reason we got married, in fact, at the time we weren't legally married. And she liked that part. In fact, we got together because I was married, and she knew that because I was married, happily married, because she lived next door. She knew Maxine. We could be friends, and we were just friends. It was very platonic right up until LSD came onto the scene. And then
That's amazing.
that changed acid, and then oh man, we made love, and the first time ever. I mean, what we found out, we had fallen in love, and for all the talk and everything, she never wanted to get married. She wanted to be a kept woman, if that, and if she was going to get married, she was going to marry a millionaire. At the time, it was a millionaire. Now it's a billionaire. And so and so that's why she did her
used two different names. Yeah.
Yep.
Fair enough. That meeting the famous meeting you had at Columbia where they paid you $100,000 to pitch 3 stories. And one of them was the roadies, and then there were a couple others that they didn't care for. You know the meeting I'm referring to?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, when you tell the story, and don't get me wrong, I love the Tommy Chong mythology, and you just like Keith Richards' mythology, you do a great job of building it up and all that kind of thing. But when you tell the roadie story, which is half really you guys always watching the roadies when you were on tour, half you guys opened for the Stones and what a big deal that was. But you have this whole thing about the Peter Principle, and you always go on this long tear about what the Peter Principle is, and it's great. But the Peter Principle was the basis for being there, which of course you're in being there. Technically, it's your first appearance in a movie. You're friends with Peter Sellers, and as you said, you're a huge Hal Ashby fan.
Yeah.
I've never heard you say that potentially, subconsciously, that's what was the inspiration for that whole Peter Principle idea for that story. Because it's all in the right time frame. You would have just seen it not that long before, and then you go in the meeting and you're just riffing up ideas. Do you think that being there really had that influence on doing that Peter Principle story?
Probably. Although I had... No, I don't think it was being there. I think that was a coincidence because the Peter Principle, it goes way back. There's a few things that went back. For instance, in Up in Smoke, the band made out of weed. Okay, that was an old joke that I'd heard about this during the communist era. Of this guy would take a wheelbarrow. And he would take it across the border, and they would, every time he'd stop him, the guards would stop him, and they'd go dig through the dirt that was in the wheelbarrow, what was in the wheelbarrow, and they would find nothing. And then when the guy retired, the cop and him got together, and he said, "Listen, I know you were smuggling something." what was it? Because we tried for 20 years to find it. We never found it. And he said, now we're both retired, doesn't matter. And so the guy said, I was smuggling wheelbarrows. So I used
That's great.
that. I
Yeah.
used that as the reason that the marijuana ban made of marijuana,
Makes
you know,
sense. Let me
and that's what I did. So I think with the Peter principle, I don't know where I got the inspiration, but I knew that. Well, I also knew that I heard stories about roadies, you know, messing up royally, you know, and instead of firing him, they moved him up, you know, because in the rock and roll world, it's not like you get anybody off the
it's
street.
Spinal Tap logic. Yeah.
Yeah, someone
Yeah.
has to be there and look
Yeah.
after. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Spinal Tap. That
I
was
want
it.
to ask you about one other thing like that, a story that you always tell that I want to know a little bit more behind, which is, the shot in next movie in the welfare office where it's Michael Winslow in the center of the frame and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stories going on in one shot. I know you're very proud of that shot and they absolutely use it in film schools to show how you can do this. But I want to know a little bit about the origin of the shot. And the reason is, I think 2 weeks after next movie came out, Caddyshack came out. Caddyshack has a very similar shot in a locker room. And around that time, when you would have been doing pre-production, Jacques Tati kept reworking his movies, and Playtime's the first film that really did those kind of scenes. I also know that you spent a lot of time in France around that time. And I was wondering if, again, might be subconsciously, might just be coincidence that all three of these things happen at once. Had you gone to a screening of Playtime in France or in America, anywhere around that period? Have you seen Playtime? Are you familiar with that work? I'm trying to figure out what brought that into the picture at that time.
It could have been very subliminal because I did live in France. So we went to all the movies, but I never went to a movie looking for material.
Sure.
I would just go and see, like I do everything.
Sure.
I just go see and absorb. So I think Jerry Lewis, he was the first guy to use video assist
of course, yeah.
in movies. Jerry Lewis's his technique and the way he would do things really inspired me. If nothing else, but using the latest technology, and when I shot when we arranged the bit, the guy that's nodding out with the cigarette.
Yeah.
His name is Tony Viscara. He's the cousin. He's Lenny Bruce's ex-father-in-law.
Got
and
it.
Tony was the guy that brought Lenny the drugs. Tony was a heroin addict, and even in the movie, the whole thing. And so that I used his junkiness in there. And it just came together, very serendipity kind of the way it did with Michael Winslow and the old guy laughing and everything else. Because I tend to use extras or actors or whatever, who's ever in the picture. We put them around doing things and that. And with me, one of the things that impressed me about like Jerry Lewis or the comedians, Charlie Chaplin, all those guys, they did visual humor.
Yeah.
They stuck to visual humor, and that way you can direct, like myself. I could direct everything that was going real easy and still be in the scene, because I was like, I'm sitting there almost like a director watching everything going, and me watching was kind of like it was the audience. I was being the audience, and the audience was being me, and they were seeing what I saw. And then putting Cheech and trying to hump Evelyn in the back again. I was always the beautiful woman somewhere somewhere in the scene. And by the way, Evelyn was Tony's niece.
Oh, okay.
So there's very
Chinese family business.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And there was an ode to Lenny Bruce, and Sally Marr. By the, do you know who Sally Marr is? Sally was Lenny's mother, but she was
and
also
she
very.
helped you get your career going. I remember.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she was also a manager of many comedians and a mentor to a lot, like Sam Kennison. Always talked about Sally, and he was she was their comedy royalty. And when Cheech and I came to town and we performed at Red Fox's Club, the whole entourage, Lenny Bruce's whole entourage, was sitting there when we performed, and
right.
it was Tony that came up to me. And it's funny because Tony's Chicano and Cheech is Chicano. He never went to Cheech. He came right up to me because he knew that I was the writer, and he told me, that we were the hottest thing, closest thing to Lenny that he had seen, and he'd been
Right.
looking. They've been looking a long time, and so at the end of his life, in Nice Dreams, I hired Tony as a writer, and I got him I think about $15,000 or something like that. And of course, he spent it all on
Yeah, you said that.
heroin,
Yeah, we never got the script. Yeah.
and he wrote a script for me, and then he OD'd. I think the last payment he went out, and it
It's
was kind of
terrible.
funny. There was two funny things about it because I got a call from the ambulance drivers, this is so and so ambulance, and are you Tommy John? Yes, and well, Tony Viscara, blah blah blah, and we want to know who's going to pay for this
I remember that. Yeah,
ambulance
yeah,
ride. And I said, hello,
yeah,
I got it disconnected or
yeah.
something. And then when Tony got buried, Jackie Gale was one of the pallbearers, and we're carrying the coffin up a hill, and Jackie Gale was cussing Tony out. You motherfucker! Why did you pick a plot in a
Yeah.
hill like that? It was a very very unique. I'm going to film it one day.
Yeah.
He had about 15 girlfriends crying at the thing. No one knew about the other one. Oh, it was it was crazy. It was crazy.
Around that time, Jerry Lewis was teaching at USC Film School. Did you go to any of his lectures or anything, or did you read his
No,
book about filmmaking? It came out around then. No, you were just
no,
inspired
no.
by the work. Okay.
I was just inspired by the work and what I heard. Like I
Uh,
said, like I didn't know who Buddy Guy was really. I faked like I did. Because I'm a so-called blues guitarist and I'd heard Buddy Guy's name, but I never connected him to who he really was and what he
right.
really did. So
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, I'm very superficial on many levels, and even though I know these people, I'm not a scholar like you.
Got it. I got you. I saw Buddy Guy open for the Stones a whole bunch of times, and I didn't know much about him either until later on. You go home and you read about it, and you're like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my, like that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
We only have a couple minutes left, and I really want to ask you a little bit about Things Are Tough All Over because, in Cheech's autobiography, he never even mentions Things Are Tough All Over. He refers to it as the third or fourth movie, never gives the title. You've never really done a lot of interviews about it. People don't want to talk about it much. It's a brilliant film. One of the number one question I have about it is whose decision was it for you to technically not be the director of the film?
It was mine. It was my
Okay.
decision.
Why didn't you want to be the
Again,
director?
well, Cheech was rebelling. He didn't want to do the movie. Period. Even though we had signed up, Cheech didn't want to do the meeting where they offered us the three movies.
Right.
Cheech, we got a documentary coming up where Cheech still would not accept Howard Brown. Howard
Right.
Brown saved us from Lou Adler. He saved us
Yeah, I know
from
he got you the 3-picture deal and everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
everything. And
But in your book, you say that the writing and the motion going forward on that picture was all Cheech. And Cheech says he had nothing to do with it. You say you had nothing to do with it. Somebody must have had something to do with it, which is why there's so little information about the picture on the internet.
well, yeah. Well, what happened was that one. like Cheech did not want me to be the director. I says, then okay, why don't we use Tom Ellison? You
Right.
know, because the editors and I were always so tight because
Sure.
the editors were always telling me what they needed too. You know, oh, by the way, we need this, we need that, and you know, as a director, okay, let's write it in there and we shoot it. And so Tom Ellison would have been good at that. I think Cheech's biggest problem is that because he wasn't really needed in there. What Cheech would do, he would go on vacation, and then we got these movies coming up, and so I would sit and write, my style of the movie. We did that with the Corsican Brothers. We did that with all the movies. And then Chief would come back off vacation, and then he'd say, "What do you got?" And then I'd show him what we had, and we would shoot a movie. Well, things are tough all over. He wanted to be more involved with it, but the trouble is with creativity, especially with the movie business, there has to be someone with the passion to really finish the project, you know.
Sure.
And because you don't really, most if not all movies rely on the writing,
Right.
the writing, and so you got the
Well, in this
writing.
case, the setups, because you were going to improvise everything anyway.
Yeah,
In each
well,
scene.
we did, but I kind of Cheech loved playing characters, and so when we did the Arab characters, as soon as we got the Arab character, he loved that part, and I loved the part playing the partner. But again, it was Cheech's, and that's why he doesn't admit it, because he named the picture. He wanted to name it "Things Are Tough Lower." He wanted to deal with the Arabs, in some manner,
Okay.
and and now that I think about it, it cracks me up, because there are, like all our movies, there are some just like brilliant pieces in
It's a
there.
brilliant picture. It's a
Oh, I'm
it
glad.
gets
Thank you.
it's from like a popular artistic community, it gets looked down on as a stoner comedy. It's a road movie that you're only
Yeah.
on the road for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's a stoner comedy. You don't smoke weed once in the movie.
Yeah.
Like it just gets so dismissed that it's almost like Ishtar. It's like if you watch the original cut of Ishtar, it's a brilliant picture, but all
Yeah.
anybody wants to talk about is how much money it lost, not how
Yeah.
good the movie is. It's the same
Yeah.
kind of thing. And I want to ask you, just because we're running out of time, and I can't thank you enough again for taking the time to talk to me. When you played Habib and Slyman in that movie, the two, it's a complete role reversal. As Pedro and Man, you're the one torturing Cheech, and he gets angry, and the humor is him getting angry, and the humor is after you see it the second or third time, watching you get ready to torture him, which is incredible. And the things are tough all over. It's the complete reverse. He's
Yeah.
screaming at you. He's yelling at you, calling you
Yeah.
an idiot like 500 times in the movie.
Yeah.
Also, as Pedro and Man, you're the chill, relaxed, whatever. And in this one, you're angry, you're violent, you're trying to kill everybody, all
Yeah.
this kind of thing. Now, my question about that is, when you're setting up the premise for the movie, was that on purpose, or did that just happen as you started improvising?
No, it was kind of designed. Cheech come up with Solomon first, his character, and so then I realized, got to be the opposite. So I'll be, if he's the king, I'll be the henchman. And no, we really enjoyed it. The behind the scenes would have been the best movie, because Howard Brown was going nuts, because the studio was telling him, where's the pot? Where's the,
Sure,
it's
yeah.
not a stoner movie. And I would say, well, talk to the director. And they knew that I was directing the movie, writing and directing the movie. And so they said, Tom's the editor. I said, no, he's the director. Look at that. Look at the credits. And so Howard says, no, you have to have a meeting with these guys. I said, okay, on one condition. He said, what? I said, I got to film the meeting. And Howard, and guess what? No meeting.
No meeting.
No meeting. They did not want to be on film. The only thing the studio did to kind of get back at me for pulling that thing was we were in Chicago New Year's Eve, and I wanted to throw a New Year's Eve party for the cast and crew, and the studio said no way, and so I threw it anyway, and I paid for it. My American Express. I didn't know I could do that because I've been poor all my life. I had no idea that I had control of enough money to throw a party like that.
Sure, yeah,
but I think it was my wife or something that did it. Oh,
you gotta go.
I gotta go.
Okay. Hey, Tommy, I can't thank you so much for being on the show. It was a pleasure speaking with you. If you ever want to talk about these movies in any more detail, I have about 20 pages of questions I could ask you.
But hey, well, let's do it again.
We should.
Set it up at your convenience. Whatever
I will.
You want.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Tommy. Take care. Have a great weekend. All right. Bye-bye.
You too, man. Take care.